really have to be able to get to those books. You really have to lower this horde.
Hi, everybody.
I don't know what the horde is. It says history of thugs. Are they going to take?
I'm just checking my. I'm getting lots of text also. I just got it. Oh, Connor says, no. I just want to make sure. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm not hearing anybody else, but oh, you know, let me see what's up. Oh, there. Hi, can you talk again, Jude?
Hi, Laura.
Hey. I had my the speaker was off for some reason, so that's always a problem. And so I see we have Connor, and we have a quorum. We have a quorum, so that's fabulous. So we have Ed, we have Jude, we have I'm seeing you in the order I see you on my screen. We have Connor and we have Jeff, and I know Dave is coming. I haven't really heard from Michael, and we have Weston. We have a guest, Weston. Hi, Weston.
Hi there, Laura.
Hi there.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. Well, I know, we're not going to spend, I don't think we'll do a lot on telecommunications tonight, but I guess we'll see where the conversation goes. So in any event, I did want to make sure that you were, we have a telecommunications set of interested people. So I wanted to make sure you were all.
I think the invitation came so late that I'm not sure the others are aware that you're talking tonight about it. Yeah. I guess I can call them, see if they can come in.
Well, if you want, the big discussion, the big plan is in 2 weeks. So I sent them the agenda that says in 2 weeks, because the ZRC had asked for 2 weeks to review. Whenever we got the law from Andrew Campanelli, the ZRC wanted 2 weeks to review it, and the 2 weeks is not up yet. So that's why today it's just if anybody has any comments that they want to share, we'll discuss it today. But the idea is to have a full review in 2 weeks. So that's the more important meeting that they know about.
Right. Okay.
So I think we're good. So okay, but I am calling us to order, if that's okay. And I will go share. And I was just I talked with David Menzies earlier today, and he is aware of the meeting. So I'm not quite sure where he is, but I do know he's coming. And let me go bring the agenda up and let me share my screen. So the main things today, we'll give you status of what's going on a number of things. So the agenda today is the minute status. I know I keep saying someday I'll send out an email and we'll all approve a whole ton of minutes. Most of them are there. A couple of them I still have to do, but most of them are there. So I'll give you the status of the laws in progress. We have housing oversight, CEA, regulating wireless, which is the main thing hot now, water supply protection. So a lot going on in all those areas, and scenic overlay. I didn't know whether, Connor, whether you wanted to review anything today on that, but if you do, we'll certainly look at what you have. And then,
yeah, if you haven't, we can send it over. We made the changes. Well, I'm sorry, I should say Ed made the changes. I managed to injure myself and was kind of out of commission for a week or so there. I'm totally fine now, but thank you, Ed, for that.
Oh, okay. So we'll go cover scenic overlay. So we'll definitely do that. And then we can look at our zoning reference document protocols, because now we have 7 people. We took a quick look at that before, and I think we had already set it up to say if we had 7, we knew what we would do. So I don't see any change there, but we should take a quick look. And then the other thing is, I had sent out 2 weeks ago, I had gotten the Complete Streets has sent their zoning requests, and we can take a quick look at that and just decide where is that on our priority list, but we can take a quick look at it. And then our next meeting is in 2 weeks. And well, I should have put on there, yeah, regulating wireless is certainly going to be the big topic there. So I'm actually going to add that. well, status of laws in progress is definitely already there. So, so it's kind of there. So anyway, do I have any motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
So moved. Yay, Connor. I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Yay. We have an agenda.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, sounds good. So I'll run down through the list and we'll just hit on whatever we want to when we want to. So the Housing Oversight Task Force, we still have our biweekly meetings. And of course, Jeff and I are on that, as is Michael. And we are, we've added some meetings because we're getting to a very busy time right now. So it's biweekly meetings, plus I think we'll be meeting weekly for a couple of weeks in a row. So when the proposed law is ready, it'll go to the town board. And then there's going to be a plan to have a presentation at a town board meeting for everybody to attend and see it all at once. And then we'll all dive into it. So that's moving along well. The CEA, there was going to be a WEC presentation on the CEA on the 8th, last Tuesday. But that meeting, because there were some power outages and there was a pretty big spectrum outage, that meeting the presentation got moved till tomorrow. So if you want to hear about the CEA and be at that presentation, that will be tomorrow. Just so you know, it'll be on the town board and you would see Ashley Slavinsky for the link to hear about the CEA. And I think it would be good for everybody. It's not actually a zoning law, but I think it's good for people on the ZRC to know what's going on with the CEA. So if you can come tomorrow, it's the main topic at the meeting tomorrow. So meeting starts at 7 p.m. and the CEA would be, I believe, probably most likely the first thing to be talked about. The next thing, well, I'll jump over to water supply protection, then I'll go back to the wireless. So water supply protection, that group is coming along really well. Well, of course, we started out with a really good law to start with, and what our goal is to get it shored up and finalized. So we've met last on, well, I'm kind of looking, I think it was the 9th, I think the 10th actually. So we met last, I think it was Thursday we met, and the map looks pretty good. Every time I send something to I call it the wellhead district, the water district wellhead protection overlay, every time I send something to that team of 7, I copy everybody on the zoning revision committee because everybody ought to know what's going on there. So you've always got, if I get it, you get it. So so everybody here does have the latest copy of the district language. It's marked up with what the team of 7 requested get updated in it. And then it also has some markups because we're looking for some more information from Steve Winkley. So it's marked up with placeholders where that is. So when we get the Steve Winkley information, I think that it's going to look pretty good. The map already looks pretty good. There was a subgroup went off and worked on the map and then brought it to the meeting we had last Thursday. And the team at the meeting did not make any changes to the map. So I think the map is looking pretty good. And then Judy Kerman sent out another version of the map, which has the same outline, but the goal is to have a map that's basically a 2-color map to go out with the water supply protection. So if you're one color, if your property's in the one color, you're in, and if you're and you're not in that color, then you're out. So we have 2 maps floating around. One is detailed that shows the things we considered to build that line. And then the other map that's going to go with the law is just the line. So Judy just sent that today. So, so you all do in the email Judy sent have the map with just the line. And then from me, you have the other map and the law. And if you look at the law document that I sent on Friday, it does include the placeholders for Steve Winkley. So I think we're getting really close for water supply protection. So with that, we've got, and I didn't know if we had any, oh, David joined and Janine joined. Okay, let me just add to my list.
23, 25 fish tanks.
So we have David, Janine, I think everybody else here.
We got rid of all of them.
Oh, and so I'm hearing somebody in the background, so I'm not sure who's got stuff going on. But I am hearing somebody in the background.
Can we have a little bit of discussion on the water wellhead stuff?
Yes.
there was some misunderstanding at the last meeting that I want to clarify, especially between David and myself, about the library specifically.
Peroxide.
Okay.
Peroxide.
I'm sorry to interject. Hey, Ed, I think you're unmuted and it's causing some echoing.
I'm also gonna switch.
Yeah, Ed, is there noise in your background, or David, maybe you have noise in the background?
No, I don't have any noise at all.
Yeah,
I see.
David.
Having nice. It's the Pat. Oh, no.
Well, it's yeah. You may choose to go on mute if Pat's if Pat's didn't make a noise, you may need to go on mute. And anyway, but Jeff wanted to talk about the water supply and the library.
Yeah, so I think at the last meeting, I'm going to switch computers here in a second because I'm going to go from my phone to my computer. But before I do that, there was discussion 2 weeks ago, something about the library using over 1,000 gallons of water, and I wasn't clear what that was from. I'm assuming that is from, as I thought about it, I think that's from some of the suggestions made by the housing committee on changes to the wellhead stuff. That had nothing to do with the library. It has no relationship to the library. I'm not sure why anyone thought it would have a relationship to the library. It has nothing to do with the library.
I recall you saying that you were, I did put in the minutes that I recalled you saying that the library was exempt from it, but nobody ever said whether or not you're going to use it. But I did recall you saying that you were exempt from it, and that you're going to generate less water than the proposed new site than the current owner of that site. So I didn't make any statements about whether you're going to use more or less, but I did say that I recalled you saying you were exempt from it. So I thought that was accurate.
1 second, I'm switching.
You should get your face more in there.
Are we safe yet?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm back just on one device now. instead of
And
two devices.
and Jeff, we can see you looking good.
So there. I mean, the reality. So the first of all, the suggestion of removing the 1,000 gallons as a restriction from the 1,000 gallons on the wellhead overlay is something that's totally independent of the library. It's just a recommendation that some people have made to not have an arbitrary number, because really is 999 gallons okay and 1,000 gallons not okay.
Well, Steve Winkley responded to that in the last meeting, and the group of 7 in our meeting Thursday was okay keeping it in because Steve Winkley explained that.
Again, I'm not part of that task force. I'm not
Right.
criticizing
Okay.
you're saying. I'm just saying what the 1,000 gallons was about. That's the only comment was about. Wasn't about that the library is not going to go over that amount, not going to go over the amount. It had nothing to do with the library. Zero to
Right.
do with the library. Okay, just to be clear, that
Right.
change nothing to do with the library.
Okay.
Then the other part of it is yes, the library is a separate municipality. We have our separate tax base. As a separate municipality, legally, we do not need to follow town zoning laws.
Right.
That's what the MOU is about. That's the legality of it. That's state law. It's not something that we can change or talk about.
Right.
Whether or not the library chooses to do that is up to the library to say
Right.
whether or not we're going to use that. We intend to use that, not to avoid following the code. We're doing it to simplify our process and save taxpayer money.
Right.
So we're going to follow the code. We're going to do things properly. We're going to do the ESA, the environmental assessment forms. We're going to do all the stuff that we need to do. But we are doing it to avoid having to go to the planning board and spend months in front of the planning board,
Mm-hmm. spending
thousands of dollars on our budget and the town budget to do exactly what we're going to do anyway. The other
Right.
part of it is, and just to continue this, the planning board is one of the affected agencies. They do have input into anything we do. When we do our seeker, their input will be considered, has to be legally considered.
Mhm.
So that's the scenario. Okay, it's not that we're trying to avoid things because we don't want to do things right. It's we're trying to avoid things because we're trying to save money for taxpayers.
Mhm.
So again, I just want to clear up that misinformation from last time. And the stuff that came from the housing committee that David was referring to last meeting, had nothing to do with the library. It was housing committee recommendations to the changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, and where I am is, let me just make my notes here. Where I am is, as far as the planning board, I think it's always a good idea to hear what they have to say, but I
We
agree
have
with
to
you.
hear what they have to say. We have to hear what they have to say. We will
I know,
not hear what they have to say. We have to. So we
Okay.
will. It's part of
But
the law. We
let
have
me-
to hear them.
I
Okay?
know, let me-
So we're not
okay,
going to
let-
not hear them.
let me finish my sentence though. I had half a sentence out. Yes. So I think I think we're in agreement. Yes, that it's always a good idea to hear what they have to say. And I certainly, as a town board member, am not at all looking for the library to have to go through the process and wait till they say, okay, and you go back 500 times, like you say, waste taxpayer dollars. So I'm in full agreement with you. Hearing what they have to say is a plus. Needing to wait until they sign off, which could take several visits and a long time. Right, I think we're on the same page that hearing what they have to say is the right way to go. So I think we all agree on that. And Jude, you had your hand up.
I don't want to get stuck on the library in this meeting, but I did find some documentation from the Department of State, which I will send to everybody, regarding who is immune from zoning review and regulations and who is not. So I'll just send it out to the whole group and somebody else can interpret it.
Cool.
So just so you're clear, Jude, our lawyers who are very well versed in state law have a letter that's been sent to the town board members outlining the laws and regulations. So yes.
Well,
I'll send it-
actually,
I'll send-
I didn't make
I'll
this
send
shit
it
up.
anyway. Excuse me?
I didn't make this shit up. It's what our lawyers, there's case law. There's case law here.
Jude, you can get a download from the state, the book on town law, what they can do and what they can't do. That's all I can suggest.
So you're in agreement with Jeff?
No, I'm just saying that you could download the law if you want to look at it from the state department, the Department of State or whatever it's called. It's on their website.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sending what she has, and I think that we're good. I think that Jeff and his leadership of the library is hitting the right note. They're going to listen to what the planning board has to say, but they don't have to go back 15 different times and take a lot of time and taxpayer dollars. So my belief is that's hitting the right
The
note.
only thing that we're going to do that's not in code, the only thing is put a library in an LI zone. That's it. And that's something that's been proposed to be changed by the NCLI team. That's the only thing that we're doing that's not in code.
Right. Yeah. So, and we'll have to see about getting that. I know there's been some discussion about getting that changed, because I know we have that whole NCLI proposed code that came from the planning board for some years ago, and that's on our to-do list, but it's, other things have been higher on the priority list. So even without addressing that whole big thing, we could still address flipping that one spot in that one table. Is still a possibility. So,
and the problem, and the reason that, and again, this is actually zoning now, we're getting to zoning here. The reason that we're doing that this way is if the zoning code has to change, it'll take months.
Mhm.
And we don't have months. If we don't close on the building by June 30th, we don't get the building. Period.
Okay.
There's a deadline here.
Right. Gotcha. So as opposed to waiting, even because as you're pointing out, to even make a small change in the code, it still has a whole process that can take months. So you're just saying that you're just going to go forward because you're exempt from the town law, but it's only in that one area. In every
Only
other
in
case,
one area that we're going to use the exemption. Everything else, we're going to follow exactly what we need to do. We're not trying to avoid doing the right thing here.
right?
No, we're trying to just make sure that we can get it done in time.
Yeah.
So again, we want, we all live here. We all love the town. We want to make sure we do the right thing. We believe in the town and believe in the town codes.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So do we want to talk about wireless next, or do we want to talk about scenic over? Well,
No, I want to make a comment about the a library going into the light industrial.
Go ahead, Ed.
I think there are so many problems with the 6-year-old planning board urging to rezone those light industrial districts that our zoning review committee should make an immediate recommendation to the town board to create in the schedule of use regulations a new allowance for a library to be built in a light industrial district. You don't have to use the other light industrial district because it only exists in the northern part of 212. But just the words light industrial, and if we submit it to the town board right away, I mean, all they need is a public hearing, a seeker determination, and that they can pass the law the same day. I'm sure there's the votes on the board to do that.
That'd be great. If we can do that quickly, that would be super. Because again, that's the only issue we have is that.
Yeah, I'll help. I mean, I would be willing to speak at a town board meeting and urge them to do that immediately.
Oh, okay. So I'm just making notes here.
And even if it's in process, when we do everything, that would also be just, it would help people understand that it's a matter of timing, not a matter of intention.
Right. And
Right.
I would put whatever weight I have behind it. And we just have to get a recommendation, a formal letter from the zoning review, the zoning commission, and send it to every town board member and to Mr. McKenna and ask for immediate passing.
Okay. Well, I know that, in my conversations with Bill, he's all for it. And so I'm not quite sure where he is in actually doing it, but I know he's all for it. So that's a really good point, Ed. We can see if we can quickly do this. So that's a good point. Okay. Anything else on the water supply area? Because that's why we talked about the library, because that's where it's going. Okay. So we'll talk about wireless because we've got Weston on the call. I don't know if we're going to have anybody else there. But so really where we are with the wireless is I had sent everybody Andrew Campanelli's law. I think it was 3 documents altogether. The big one is almost 50 pages. And then the other ones, the only feedback that I think I got back so far on it is Ed had sent an email. We could either go through it or we could just say, hey, we're really going to be doing a deep dive in 2 weeks. But Ed had sent an email with his comments that I've just forwarded to everybody a little while ago, that there are some things that Ed is recommending that come out of this. So we can either spend some time on this call talking about those items, or people can read the email, digest it, and we can talk about Ed's proposals next time when we talk about the whole document and everybody, the full review. The idea is that we'll do a full review because everybody wanted 2 weeks to review it and the 2 weeks is not up yet. So the plan is on the 28th, it's a full review.
Laura?
Yeah, go ahead. And I can't see everybody's hand because when I'm sharing my screen, but I'll unshare my screen and then I can actually see more people.
I wanted to make a comment on the light industrial and NC zoning in the proposed law, Campanelli's proposed law. I don't understand why LI and NC were singled out for different uses.
Well, me too, actually, because trying to put, it's all residential and saying, oh, go put some towers there. It's all residential. Right.
So that was like the second part is like this area next, LI and NC here are totally bordered by residential properties, and it's probably denser than many residential districts in other places. So it didn't make sense.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. And I know I'll call on some hands in a sec. So I did want to let people know before I forget, I did ask Bill when, because Andrew Campanelli offered to come and spend some time with us. And Bill thought April would be a time to do it. So we should really be doing at our next meeting is building a list of things that we want to ask Andrew Campanelli and then invite him in April to come talk to so the goal is April. And they're just making another note here. March 28th, build a list.
Do you have any idea why he singled that?
Well, you know, I don't know. The quick answer is no, I don't. If I were to guess, I would guess that he thought you had to put it somewhere, because I know he keeps saying you can't tell these companies you can't put things anywhere and that you can't do anything. You've always got to give them, here's what you can do, here's what you can't. And he might have jumped to the conclusion that, hey, it sounds like it's industrial, light industrial, neighborhood commercial, he might have jumped to the conclusion that it's not residential. I think that was a jumping to my guess, but I don't know.
Right.
So anyway, we had a whole pile of hands up. I saw, I think, Jude's hand up and Jeff's hand up. And at one point I didn't know if I saw Ed's hand up.
I took mine down because it was having to do with when he was going to come and give the presentation, and you said,
oh, so okay, all right. Does anybody else have anything that they? Go ahead. Well, I saw Jeff first. Jeff, go ahead.
My guess is that what you said, Laura, is correct. He doesn't understand what the LI actually is in town, and it's so close to residential community. And I think that typically LI is more separate in most towns from residential communities. And so that's, I think, a problem with having someone who doesn't understand our community and where things are writing code. So I think that's an issue. I think the problem that he's going to face, or we're going to face, is that we do need to allow it someplace. Probably we can't totally outlaw it entirely.
Right.
We need to find a place that fits. And clearly the LI where you guys live and where the library hopes to be is not a good spot for it.
Absolutely. So Ed, you had your hand up.
Well, yeah, I'm also wondering if maybe somebody got in touch with Mr. Campanelli and presented the light industrial proposal that the planning board gave 6 years ago. But, you know.
Well, I never gave it to him, I know that.
Well, there's this attorney, Ron Porty, whom you remember from our 2005 and 2006 meetings, was very hostile.
Oh, I remember Ron Forty. He came to the planning board a lot.
Yeah, and so I was thinking maybe he got in touch with Mr. Campanelli. But anyway, we don't want 150-foot towers in a residential area in Bearsville. Perfect.
Right.
I agree with Jeff that the Federal Communications Act is so on the side of cell towers that we need to find, but we have a place in California Quarry. We could devote another parcel. It doesn't cover the western part of town, so maybe we need to designate another parcel that would be satisfactory, where they wouldn't have to build such a huge tower, and put it in the western part of town somewhere.
Right.
And then satisfy those people who dangerously don't have cell service in the western part of town. So we need, you know, that's another committee. So, you know, but, you know, well, you know, committees are how things are done in a little town. So,
Right.
But anyway, I think that's why I think this planning board recommendation for this NC, and do NCs want to have cell towers in their midst? I mean, this whole thing has to be examined carefully by the zoning revision committee, and maybe making a recommendation that thank you very much to the planning board, because they thought the sewer was going to come out to Bearsville. I mean, it was part of an overall package to have the sewer and more development. I mean, I understand, but the people of Bearsville were not consulted with these zoning changes.
Well, and we haven't approved them ourselves. We haven't even addressed them yet. So yeah, they're kind of on the list. So anyway, I think that what we're going to want to do is at our meeting on the 28th, March 28th, it'll be totally, and just like Ed sent his things that I forwarded to everybody, we definitely want to be, it would be good for everybody to be prepared. And I know that Andrew Campanelli's document is a 50-page document, so it's very long, and then he's got other documents he sent besides. So it's a very long document, but I think that, I mean, that was the biggest issue I had as well, was the NC and the LI, and the fact that we really ought to be picking where we want things. So it would be good if people, as you have input, maybe you can send it, and we'll be discussing on the 28th.
Yeah.
And Ed, go ahead.
Yeah. And another thing, I've read through this. It's 46 pages on my laptop. The main document's 46 pages, but it's written like the Bible. I mean, I'm a professional. All I do is write, and this is very ponderous document, and sometimes difficult to understand. I flagged some. You don't want any ambiguity in such a complicated issue. So I think this is kind of a ponderous document, and I don't know how to fix it, because Campanelli obviously knows the current state of the situation. You know, all these states and towns are struggling against the feds and against the telecommunications company, and it's a big battle. But I don't know, you know, I know that plus we have a very active group of anti-5G activists who want this law immediately passed. But I don't think it can be immediately passed, given the structural problems that I'm not an engineer, but I recognize in this document. And we might need, I don't know, maybe Campanelli can continue working on it and make it better.
Well, so tell me again, I know you referred to it as a ponderous document. So you're saying it's not really crisp or clear. And I haven't spent a lot of time on it, because I've been doing a lot of housing task force documentation, which has been time consuming. So I still have to read it myself. But do you view it as a ponderous document, which means it's not clear?
I think it has some, it's generally well written. The guy knows what he's talking about, but there are some sections that to my eye, are not clear. I've flagged some of them, and I'll try by the next meeting beforehand to send a list of flagged areas. I mean, I don't want to, look, I get hostile emails from the anti-5G activists. I mean, I got really victimized by them about 2 or 3 months ago, and I really don't, I want to send everything to Laura. I don't want to receive any hostile, I got hundreds of hostile emails generated by this group that's hates 5G like it hates war. So, but I'm as a conscientious volunteer, I still have to call it like I see it. It has problems.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate that. Would you be interested, because I know, as I've done sometimes with other documents, it's in Word, right? The document's I think this document's in Word.
Yes. And a PDF. He sent a PDF. There's a PDF and there's Word.
That's right. Well, and I guess I'm forgetting whether because I printed it off, so I haven't actually looked at the file again. So is the 46-page document, is that PDF or is that in Word?
Word.
But because you could actually, and if you wouldn't mind, and it would be a huge help, I think, to everybody, if you wouldn't mind, if you went in there and every time you had a question, because you could use the markup comment feature, just highlight, for example, if you think there's a paragraph that's not clear, you could highlight it and just put a comment that says is not clear, because I think it would be helpful to, I think it would be helpful as we review it as a group to figure out what questions we're going to have for Mr. Campanelli and what we're going to respond back. So I'd be interested to see if you could use the markup language, and then we could go through that, and then people add. I think Ed, having you because you got the most experience with writing laws and you've been, and you wrote our telecommunications law before. I think if you took a crack at putting your markups in it, and then everybody else kind of held their comments off to the side, and then we'll review in 2 weeks, we'll review your document with your markups, and then also talk about anybody else's comments. And just, and so our plan is we're not actually changing the document at all. Right now, my plan is we'll just do a markup of our comments. And then when we see Mr. Campanelli, and hopefully in April, hopefully at our first meeting, first town board meeting in April, is hopefully when we'll see him, we can have a list of comments, or we might even, after the 28th, we might even have a list of comments we want to email to him, just to ask questions. But I think it's fair to, with some markup, we'll see. So I appreciate, Ed, you doing your early look at it. Hi there, Jude.
I had a couple comments, and I certainly don't have expertise, but a couple things, and I didn't study it, but a couple things jumped out at me, and I thought there was some change in language from the law, and he calls them small wireless facilities, where I think in the law we have now, they're called personal wireless facilities. But I did see that there are, those are permitted in residential districts, R3, R5, and R8. And I don't, I know there are restrictions on them, but apparently they were also permitted in the other law, in the older law. But I noticed some, change in terminology. I saw this whole section on a shot clock, and I don't think that appears anywhere else in our law. I've heard that mentioned in the planning board. When I was in the planning board, we never used that term. But, there's just a few little things that are a little inconsistent with the rest of the law too. But, and then this question about, I actually copied it. It was 260-64L, and it's small wireless facilities, and it says within all residentially zoned in other districts, they shall be set back. It talks about setbacks and height restrictions, but they're allowed.
Well,
Okay.
that's
what you're saying. They have to have.
That's the new common parlance, small wireless facilities. That's what 5G is. That's what all the new cells and telecommunication things are called, small wireless facilities.
So do we want to allow them in R3, R5, and R8?
Well, people want, that's where the FCA, Federal Communication Act, comes in. You can't restrict a property owner from getting access to wireless communications. You can't do it. You can't use health. You can't use, you can use aesthetic and historic, but that's the new term, small wireless facilities.
Right.
But you can, keep them so much distance from the residential district. Like they'll have them on every pole in every electric pole in town. They'll have a antenna on. So you can say that you can only have it, 50 feet, 100 feet from a residential district or from a residence.
Yeah, I haven't gone through the law with that in mind, David. I've only been looking, this is a very complicated 46-page single-spaced document. So I'll go through it again and look for the regulations on distance of antennae from each other. I didn't see any, but maybe we can stick some language to require a minimum distance between antennae, but I didn't see it in the law yet.
Yeah. So, and again, anything that you think is confusing, because if you can use the comment and the markup, right? If you highlight something and click on add comment, then it just goes over to the right. And so anything that you think is confusing, you can just say so. Anything you think should be added, I would just say it in the comments off to the side. So that then we'll have questions, that'll be we'll be building our questions for Andrew Campanelli for the April meeting. So I think that'll be good. Okay. So anything else that we want to discuss about the wireless right now? So everybody should be prepared. And I know Ed, as I said, if Ed could mark up his document, we'll use that as kind of a base for our discussion, but everybody else should have their comments ready to talk about as we get to, as you address different areas in the proposed law. And then we'll try to get a consolidated ZRC response so that we're ready with our questions when we get Andrew to come. So I think that'll be good. Okay. So next we'll move on to Connor. You said that you do want to share your scenic overlay law at this meeting. We'll take another look at it.
I was just unmuting. I did email it to you. To be honest, I'm on my phone at the moment. I'm having some issues with my computer. If you would care to, you can either distribute it and maybe Ed would care to review it, or you could, or we could all review it for next time.
Well, let me revise text. So I see you've got it, and I can.
It's basically what we reviewed in detail the last meeting, only I took the suggestions of the group and added it to Connor's draft. And then sent the corrected version back to Connor. Then he came down with a medical problem.
Yeah. So Connor, if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do, well, the thing is, if I could either show it, my gut feel is it's better for everybody to get it, see it, read it, embody it, and then respond. But that means if we did it that way, to send it to everybody, let them really digest it, then we wouldn't talk about it for another 4 weeks, because we've got, but you know, in the meeting on the 28th, we're definitely talking about the wireless. So we could make this our topic 2 weeks after that, if you're okay. If you would rather see us jump on it now, I'm happy to share my screen and share what's in the email. But I kind of
email to all of us so we can all actually see it.
Yes. So let me do that. Let me do that right now.
I'd make the request actually of anyone that does a proposal that we all get it, not just Laura.
Well, and it's okay. It comes, yeah. Eventually, you'll definitely all get it. Yeah. So it did come to me, and I will. And someday I'll. Let me see. I mean, let me just do a. I'm sending it right now. So we've got Ed. We have David. We have. I'm doing this kind of in my habitual order. We got Connor. We have Jude.
Yeah, my only issue is that I'm still, since I'm on my phone, I don't have a particularly large screen to read from, but I can do it.
Right. So the quick question is, we have a bunch of people on the call that are not members of the ZRC. So I see, and let me just go back here. So I know we have Janine, we have Weston, and we have Rex on. This has to do with scenic overlay. I know what Janine is on, I think, a lot for looking at the water district, because that's where she lives. And I think that Weston and Rex are on for the telecommunications. Are you guys wanting a copy of what we're talking about for the scenic overlay? Or as I send it out, did you want to be on CC?
I don't mind being CC'd. I enjoy reading it. It's good to know what's going on.
Okay. So Weston or Rex, I know you're here. Did you want to be CC'd?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And I wasn't looking. Weston, that was you, I think, right?
Yes, you want me to pull my video off? Yes, there I am. Yeah.
Well, I'm not looking anyway, because I'm over trying to send this, so I'm not. Okay. All right.
Okay. Just bear in mind, I have one comment. Mr. Collins made a point about Andrew Campanelli not being sensitive to the Woodstock area and the different residential districts and so on. I believe that Steve actually was trying to get the ZRC to have an early meeting with Mr. Campanelli so that, you could sort of mutually educate each other about the different districts, so that he could craft a law that would be sensitive to the different districts. But he was rebuffed. So now hopefully we can clear up some of those problems on the 28th.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so we're not going to see Mr. Campanelli until April, but on the 28th, we'll gather a consolidated set of zoning revision committee questions and concerns. Okay. We're not going to, so what I've asked that Ed would do, because he's got a bunch of comments already, is for him to put his comments in, because when you're in a Word document, you can highlight a phrase or a word or whatever you want, and then click on add comment, and then you can add your comment to the side. So not that, and I'm hoping that Ed does not actually update any words, but he just adds comments to the side. We'll discuss as a committee what we would like to recommend that Andrew do. And so what Ed has is going to be the start of a discussion, but everybody should come ready with their ideas. And then we'll have a set of questions or recommendations. So when we talk to Mr. Campanelli, when he joins us at a town board meeting in April, we'll have a consolidated set of questions or concerns. So that's my plan of approach, is we'll talk on the 28th to consolidate the zoning revision committee questions and concerns. Everybody should have at that point looked at all 46 pages of the document, as well as there are 2 other documents that he sent. I think one was only 1 page and one wasn't too bad either. So, and we'll kind of fold together our concerns. So,
Sure.
Okay, so that's the hope. So I've got, so I did just send, I did just send to everybody what Connor had. So it's an email, and as I said, I forwarded it. So do people prefer that we make this our primary topic in 4 weeks, or do people prefer that we spend time going through it now? Would you rather digest it and then go through it in 4 weeks, or go through it now?
If you'll allow me to just go through it again, what I'd like to do is either one of 2 things. Just read the changed language again and either get through the whole document and see if anyone has strong suggestions by the end, or I can stop periodically and ask for, quick questions and suggestions, though I'd like the chance to review it now that, we have almost everybody here.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm sharing my screen again. I'm going to forward it, because by forwarding it, I can actually highlight things in the document. So that's what, so that's my plan, is you've got the floor, but then
Right.
I will make updates as you.
All right,
I
that's
can
fine.
highlight things and whatever.
So I'm reading it out of Gmail right now, so I'm not going to be able to see your screen, just
Okay.
because that's the best way for me to read it right now.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll just start at the very top. The intent and purpose of the Scenic Overlay District is to protect the historic viewscapes of mountain escarpments, steep hillsides, ridge lines, and forested section of Woodstock above a certain elevation, usually 1,200 feet. We had reviewed why that language was there before. It is in the historic, aesthetic, environmental, and long-term economic interest of the town of Woodstock to protect and preserve the lands and forested areas contained within the Scenic Overlay District, and with additional zoning regulations. And just jumping off of that, most of what we're looking at here is just clarifying language. So the only change in 260-36 is upgrading, I think it is an upgrade, but reducing the square footage requiring of new construction requirements to be necessary to a special use permit procedure from 300 to 150. The thinking is 300 square feet in a lot of cases is an additional bedroom, more capacity, and depending on where it's put or what floor it's put on, does have the potential to disrupt, if not tended to, as well.
Can I ask you a question? Because you do. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Okay.
Right, I can't see, so I just want to finish one section at a time and then go through it. And the only other thing is we changed the word excluding to including decks and pools. So yeah, now you have a question.
Yeah, so my question is, I know you mentioned, I see, currently 300, I see where you reduced it to 150, but then right after that, you have accessory structures exceeding 300 square feet. Did you mean to also reduce that 300 to 150?
Yes, but that is where we want to get this approved, essentially. So yes, that could, so if it's reduced, that would then in turn become 150.
Okay, so I'm just looking to see if there's a way to highlight I don't know if I can highlight this, but I'll at least change.
It'd be great if we could do this in the future with an actual Word document that we could maybe make changes to and highlight things as we go.
Well, I can highlight it here. I forwarded the email, so I can be highlighting. I can do all those things right here. But by forwarding the email, I can edit.
So understood. Jeff, we'll be if we do this again, absolutely. So
the other question I have, I'm sorry, if on this
yes.
is I'm not a fan of arbitrary numbers in zoning code. I've decided that I don't like them because what's the difference between the practical difference between 149 square feet and 150 square feet for an addition? And having that doesn't, to me, having an arbitrary number, which it is arbitrary, you just picked a number. We don't know that that's going to be good or bad or indifferent. So what's the intent that we're trying to do here? If the intent is to prevent excessive, to prevent changes that are going to affect, I guess the question is, what is the intent? Because I think we can maybe satisfy the intent without an arbitrary number. And so that's my question. What is the intent that we're trying to get here?
Well, pretty much to prevent the type of expansion that would either prerequisite or encourage someone to pursue a view line or anything like that. So if, for example, it's 150 feet is more than an 8x8 shed, but it is in substantially less than a 300-foot square room. And while I don't want to bog down the planning board with every new additional structure, I think of things, like, for example, 8x8 sheds and small little, build 2 greenhouses, whatever. But anything beyond what again, that some of it's from working in construction, knowing what a room like that looks like. But this was sort of something we had been kicking around for a long time, because while the number is arbitrary to an extent.
Well, hang on, Dave, should you go on mute, Dave?
I wasn't me. That sound is not coming from here.
Okay.
I mean, we should probably all go on mute when we're not talking. It's just an unfortunate etiquette requirement for these modern meetings. But I do agree with you, Jeff, at least in terms of the perception of the number being arbitrary, but it does also at least give us a cutoff so that we're putting undue burden.
It sounded very measured and reasonable.
Yeah.
That was good. You sounded calm.
Oh, it's Ed.
Not coming from here.
Yep, I think we solved it.
Are you able? I was going to say, if you're able. So I'm sorry, does that answer your question, Jeff? And
I mean, it seems to me that you could, seems to me maybe what you said was the intent. The intent is that you don't want anything that affects the view shed to not have overview. So can you put that in the code? Just put it that way, that if it affects the view shed, then it needs to be covered. I don't know if that, again, is that reasonable or is that not practical?
Yeah. Hi, Jude. I see you have your hand up.
I think
just then you're leaving it in the hands of one person, the zoning enforcement officer, to determine that. So sometimes it is a lot less arbitrary to have a very specific number. And if the planning board says no problem, it should be a quick, we don't have to review this. I think that you really do have to have specific numbers. And even though you might think they're arbitrary, I think leaving it up some vague description of what affects the view shed and what affects the view shed today, or might not affect the view shed today, could very clearly affect the view shed tomorrow. So it's much better being reviewed by the planning board than leaving it in the hands of one very overworked zoning enforcement officer.
So then, okay, I'm just playing games here. So what happens if someone does a 149 square foot addition and then does a sequential 149 square foot addition to that one to make it 298? Right? then you got the same, so again, it's a whole.
It's,
That's a good point, because that's a question that's coming up right now about other kinds of structures and questions about that. You're right. I don't know that you can cover every eventuality.
Right, so that's why I'm trying to get to the intent, which is.
I mean, so I guess someone willing to, shingle and button up a 150-foot addition and then do the same thing over and over and over again to build an amalgam room.
I would think it would be unlikely. I would think that somebody would want to build their 2,000 square foot house 150 feet at a time.
Well, I'm not suggesting to do that, but I'm saying to add the bedroom in two components.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, I can see what you're saying in that, but I would imagine the only thing we could add then, I would think that might cover that, is to say additions built on additions in more elegant terms are subject to review, or compound additions.
Well, I guess what I might recommend as an alternative is to put an or in here. House additions exceeding this, accessory this, or items that impact the view shed. So if you do it in or, then you've got, if you exceed this or so you're not totally subjective, you've got some objective, but you can say, hey, you're affecting the view shed. So I'm just going to add this, that effect.
You've already got that down at the last sentence. In the event that any proposed development within the scenic overlay does not, in the judgment of the zoning enforcement officer, adequately conform to those standards, the relevant application for building permit should be referred to the planning board. I mean, I think you've got that covered. And yes, I know the zoning enforcement officer doesn't always catch everything, but I mean.
Well, I don't see it as exactly saying that. So I just said, or structures that affect the view shed, because the view shed, because before it says what your size is, but the goal is we don't want to affect the view shed. So I'm just tossing this out here for people to think about and digest. So, okay.
I guess it gives a certain amount of I guess leeway to the zoning enforcement officer with that language, though ultimately with the way we've chosen to go and pointing out that last sentence in the paragraph, it's still ultimately up to them whether or not to refer it for review. And that is going to ultimately be true in all cases, which does also, to be honest, and I'm not saying this for its own sake, but having a number gives you a more clear standard for that zoning enforcement officer to say, like, oh, so this now has to go to the planning, but it's no longer ambivalent.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's move, because we're not closing on this in this meeting. We're going through it. So
okay,
I've scrolled up to standards within scenic overlay 260-66.
All right, so all owners of parcels located entirely or in part with the scenic overlay district seeking to develop a parcel shall apply to the planning board for special use permit and undergo all the requirements of obtaining an SUP. All application forms provided by the building department for developing the scenic overlay shall have checkoff boxes certifying that the parcel is entirely or part in the scenic overlay.
Okay, so let me ask you a question before we go on. So before we said it had to be a certain size, but here you're saying everything. So you're saying before, if it's bigger than this or that and that, but now you're saying all owners of parcels, you can develop a parcel. So we just included everybody.
Yeah.
Bear with me one. Yeah.
So why are we having, if you're bigger than 150 square feet or affect the view shed, if now we just turn around and say, no matter what you're doing, you got to come. So maybe we didn't need.
Right, because the checkoff box was something that came up recently, and we added in there per the planning board, but it does sort of overlap that language. So let's just see here. I mean, the only thing I can think of would be anything that's sort of doesn't require a building permit, perhaps, but then I'm not sure that that wouldn't already be covered. Just I think the limit would be an 8x8 shed. So
Well, but we're
suppose-
kind
yeah,
yeah,
well,
I'm just gonna add a comment. Yeah, I know we got this underscore thing here. Get rid of the underscore. So why say all here, but limit based on size?
so let's just have so that if we take it as that way and there's no utility in pursuing a square footage requirement, which again may or may not be helpful in the event that something doesn't require a building permit.
I think 80 square feet is anything under 80 square feet, you don't need a building permit.
I see. And yeah, so that would take care of it. So that might preclude the removal at least of the square footage requirement in 260-36. What do you think, Ed?
It's on mute.
Well, it sounds like we've got that commented on. So should we continue?
Well, yeah, I've commented for food for, and I'll be sending this back out to be thinking about. So
Okay.
Sure.
So moving on to A, we just again have the same language stipulating the 150 foot, the square foot floor area or the accessory structure. And that may too be subject to removal depending on what we decide with the previous section.
Mhm.
Skipping all the way down to 260-67, section 2. And this is one of, I think, the real important ones. For all land purchases located within the scenic overlay district in Woodstock, the realtor handling the purchase shall provide a document from the town of Woodstock for the applicant to sign and notarize, confirming that they have been informed of the scenic overlay standards as outlined in 260-66, and that violating these standards at any time may cause their special use permit and certificate of occupancy to be revoked.
So what happens when the realtor has no idea they need to do this and doesn't do it?
Well, I think that that should, well, in terms of a specific fine, that should be discussed, but I think they should be fined and perhaps held partially liable for reaching either whatever we want to call it, mitigation, remediation in that case. And we do have section below that's going to stipulate the updated fine structure, but that's what I would say.
So, I mean, my take on this is, I don't know that we as a town can enact real estate law like this.
As I understand it from the meetings we had with the planning board, it's pretty routine for the realtors to provide what are called disclosure forms for any number of reasons, whether they're local law, state law, or even, for insurance reasons or whatever. So it's this, as we had discussed it previously and in other meetings, did seem like something that was very doable. It would be a form that the town can provide to realtors, just to be specifically to be dated, signed, and ultimately notarized, just for the function of memorializing that the applicant has been made aware at the purchase stage that they are going to be liable for all of the, for adhering to the code as we're discussing it.
Yeah. So Connor, I just added a note. I don't know if you can see my screen because I know you're on your phone, but
Yeah.
I added a comment. We will be asking our attorney, because that was one of the things you had originally said anyway, was you're looking forward to having our attorney weigh in on these ideas. And really,
Yeah.
it's a question for the attorney of what can be done. And I certainly know realtors there's a whole pile of forms that you do need to fill out. So, there's a whole pile of forms, So we'll try to add this as one of the bunch, and we'll see if the attorney agrees.
Okie dokie.
I mean,
So
many attorneys who do transactions in Woodstock don't live in Woodstock or don't even live close to Woodstock. So I have no idea how they're going to find out this relatively obscure form needs to be done. So that's just a question.
That's a good question. And I guess I wonder whether, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know if there's any way to have a title search pick up, because it wouldn't be a title searchable item, I'm sure, but it would be nice to, maybe it would be, if there were somebody to have a title search pick up when a property does not have one of these in place, or, I mean, I don't know. It's a good question, Jeff, how to enforce that.
I mean, I'd have to imagine that at some point, you know, during the transaction, the realtor was going to have to reach out to the town and you know, button things up at some point. So getting into that process and figuring out how to implement it is fine. But again, they know where to get all the other forms. I'm sure we can find a way. It's a being with everything being online and it being even made available on the website. I'm sure there's a way to get the word out.
Yeah. So okay.
I'm going to have to go. I have a previous appointment. I'm really sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
So-
Shall we continue? I know we want to get moving, and we're getting there.
Yep. So,
All right, so
go ahead.
Section D, the prohibition. We added at the end of this line, and which preserves tree lines, forest canopies, and the intrinsic value of trees in the scenic overlay district. Essentially, just clarifying some intent. Section G is the one I really want to have poured over, because this is where I think a lot of most lacking language in the code was. Originally just the minimizing of tree cutting is now accompanied by the minimizing of tree cutting. Applicant is expected to avoid any non-essential tree cutting, modification, or removal regardless of size in the visible canopy of the scenic overlay. This includes but is not limited to clear cutting, topping, limbing, or practices that would harm the health of these critical trees. Non-essential shall be understood to mean having no fundamental impact on the buildability of the lot, the personal safety of owners or visitors to the property, or safety of existing structures, where all other measures have been explored and exhausted. And while I thought that fit nicely into the personal safety of owners or visitors to the property, we added also the removal of dead trees is allowed.
Yeah, I like your updates to that. That was nice. Thank you.
And finally, just to button up the section, to this end, the planning board may require the applicant to supply recent aerial drone footage and drone photos done by a legally licensed drone operator of the entire area impacted prior to the approval of the proposed development, and additional drone footage filmed after the completion of the development of this in the scenic overlay district.
Yeah, that looks good.
Any questions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the non-essential is, I mean, I understand you're trying to be more specific, but I think there's judgmental stuff there that is hard to legislate.
Was better than what it was. I can tell you that.
It's definitely better than what it was, but you still no fundamental impact on the buildability. Who makes that judgment?
In this point, depending on what stage we're talking about, if it's prevention or mitigation, either some combination of the planning board or the tree committee. Because at the end of this, we talk about updating their mission to include the making them available as essentially as consultation to applicants at every stage of of new development. And so they can come in and say that this, and that's what the aerial drone footage is for the planning board to look out and see and be able, especially to pair with our site visits.
So I guess my question, Connor, is if the building, the agent building, the building contractors designing, building, planning this out, believes that they need to cut X amount of trees. And so they cut X amount of trees. And then later the planning board says, no, you needed to cut X minus 5 amount of trees. Who's right? Because someone that in theory has a building experience that I need to cut these in order to get, the septic field done, or the building, the housing, how does that interact with what a different opinion could be? That's my question, is whose opinion wins?
I guess all I can tell you is we've had examples in the past where, again, when we're able to get ahead of these things, and that's the goal of all of this, by bringing more awareness to the law at the selling stage, making the tree committee available to applicants at the planning, not just the mitigation stages, to get people to the table as early as possible, so that, like this example I'm about to give you, like when someone brought us a site plan that had a larger area of disturbance, what we ultimately ended up doing, it's actually happened a couple times, though I can't give you a specific case number, is we just asked them to say, like, it might be as simple as moving the building, moving the parking lot in a certain way, swinging it around. At the time, they weren't aware necessarily of the standards, or they weren't as minimal in their approach as they could have been. And, we're negotiating that in good faith, and it worked out fine, and they got to build their house. But it just needed a little bit of in these cases, a sort of shift or a rotation. But again, the purpose is to get them to the table as early as possible, understanding and what it is we're trying to achieve here, and us providing them with more resources to do it.
I mean, I get all that, but the initial coding, the minimization of tree cutting, obviously that's very subjective. Unfortunately, I think no fundamental impact is also fairly subjective. So I don't know that you've cleared away the subjectiveness of the law. I don't know what that means, fundamental impact. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means I can't clear more than 5 feet away from where I expect to build a house, or more than 10 feet away from where I expect to build a house. So it's still subjective. And I think the subjectiveness is what we're trying to get away from.
Well, I guess it depends on how if I have to go and define fundamental in the law as well. Perhaps
one way to do it would be that they have to define the building envelope and get the building envelope approved by the building and clearing envelope, both approved by the planning board. That would make sense to me, right? Because when we're looking at laws around all development in town about, you must come to planning board with your building envelope and your disturbed envelope. And if that comes to the town as, it comes to the planning board as, because they've already got to do an SUP, right? They're already using an SUP, because we've already said that earlier. If they come to the planning board with the building envelope and the clearing envelope defined, and that must be approved by the town, by the planning board, I think that is what we want to have them do.
So, I mean, it does. Now, I mean, whether that belongs in the minimizing of tree cutting section is one thing, but to add in, and I can't see the shared screen at the moment, but if we want to add a section that stipulates specifically, that essentially the area of this, well, I mean, let me think, but they put it this way. We could have another section that stipulates what's already practice in the planning board, which is to assess the area of disturbance, which is ultimately what that is, the area that the building is going to take up, and then the area that is going to have to be ultimately disturbed in order to make that permanent building. And that happened already. So maybe what makes sense is to say then non-essential shall be understood to mean having no
Let me just
fundamental.
go through a process I went through to build the school land. Okay, just to give you an example, it's not in the scenic overlay, but we had to come to the planning board with exactly where we're going to cut trees. And so we gave them, you know, a plan of exactly what trees we're going to cut. We ended up, because the person cutting the trees made a mistake, we cut more than we wanted to cut, more than we intended to cut, more than we should have cut. So we then had to mitigate that. But the idea is we came to the planning board, and again, this was not scenic overlay, but even with that, we said, this is exactly the land we're going to clear. And the planning board approved that. So it seems like we can do the same thing here. It's like before you can do any kind of a building permit is you have to present to the planning board in your SUP process exactly what you're going to cut.
And that is already part of the planning board process. We could codify that procedure into this law. I just wonder if you feel that, again, in terms of the definition of minimizing tree cutting, if changing or adding on top of having no fundamental impact on the buildability of the lot and not exceeding the planning board approved minimal area of disturbance or just area of disturbance.
I think that for me, as someone who went through a project of building something, I don't want a word that says minimizing. I don't want a word that says non-essential. I want to know exactly what I can do and can't do. So I want to go to the planning board and say, this is what I'm planning on doing. Is this okay? The planning board that says, no, you need to make it this smaller amount. I'm like, okay, fine. I now know what I can do. So clarity is more important than anything else for me as someone who's done a building project.
Yeah, and I mean, but what I'm asking is, does that, because again, it's sort of like, are we going to get really granular and put in the already existing procedure the planning board goes through, which again, we're wanting to add, make people aware of course, so they don't jump the gun and do these things ahead of time, which is still something. How can you stop that all the time? But do you feel that adding into this section something that specifically denotes planning board approval for an area of disturbance, it would make this section better for you?
I do personally, because it makes it clear. Makes it clear.
So,
the process. You go to planning board,
Laura,
proposed area of disturbance, and then they approve it or they modify it. I think that makes it really clear.
So what I think maybe the easiest thing to do and just is to not remove anything as is. We can change where all other measures have been explored and exhausted by the planning board.
Okay,
I guess I'm just not clear with what's so hard about just saying all tree cutting must be approved by planning board, period.
We could add that. Well, the only thing is there is an existing law that essentially what we're building around is we can't stop people from cutting down dangerous dead trees.
Well, I understand that. I'm talking about cutting trees with the intention. This is under the section of what you need to do to do a development. So this is under the code, which is prior to issuance of a building permit. It's under that section. So prior to issuance of a building code, you must have approval from the planning board for a tree cutting.
So the advantage of maybe including some of this language is for the people who don't come to the planning board before they start cutting. That then there's something to lean on.
So So what
Well,
I
what
would
I-
I'm just
But what I
trying to
kind-
make it clear.
I'm just going to break in here. What I kind of like to do, I think we had a really good discussion. I've highlighted, so I think Connor can go off and give some thought to it. I don't know if it's going to benefit us to talk about it for, if you think it's going to benefit us to talk about it 5 or 10 more minutes, I'm in. But we've had the discussion, and maybe Connor can go off and think about it and see what he
So-
thinks.
If you could just add one thing to the notes, Laura,
Sure.
I'm back in the Zoom for a moment.
Mhm.
I would just say between the second to last and last sentence of the removal of dead trees allowed, I would
Mhm.
just add, just to keep the thought fresh, explored and exhausted by the planning board to cap that sentence off. And again, I'll flesh that out. And between that and the next sentence, the planning board must approve the area of disturbance for these the planning board must approve the area of disturbance, comma, and
I mean, because they planned.
the planned area of disturbance and the removal of, or I should say, the removal and or designation of non-essential trees. What do you think of that, Jeff?
I think that's fine. I just, to me, that's the bottom line, is that you need to go to the planning board with your plan, and they need to approve the plan for the removal of trees. That's really the simplest thing.
Okay, and then it goes on for the drone photography bit, which is what,
That confirms you did the right thing.
yeah, this dovetails nicely. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna blast through the rest of this because I know we're late. We just reiterated that the definition of non-essential in this section. And here was again a point of contention we clarified later on. Second paragraph C1, commencing or engaging in tree removal and modification on any parcel in the scenic overlay district prior to receiving a special use permit for the clear cutting shall be punished by a fine up to $5,000 per day pending the ongoing attendance to remediation. And
Yeah. And somehow I would like to have a clarification there that says there's a point at which they become aware, and then there's a point at which, because it can take you a week to get. I'll tell you, I need some tree work done from the ice storm. The ice storm was a month ago. I keep texting my tree guy, and it's been a month, right? So
Yeah.
so there's got to be some some start and finish time having to do with when they've been notified and proving progress and.
And basically us saying pending the ongoing attendance to remediation. I mean, again, this is a little vague, but what I don't want is to have this be something that goes after your everyday people who accidentally, cut down a tree or something. There's a wide berth between up to $5,000 a day and versus the everyday things that we see. Like 5,000 is sort of like at some point beyond that, it starts to feel like, I don't know, to me, an environmental disaster. And yet for some people, that's just enough to get them to the table.
Right.
The thing that I'm confused about is this is under this section of clear cutting as part of commercial logging operation. This is a sub sentence within that section. So if someone goes in and is Laura just talked about, if some tree is heavily damaged because of the storm, do they have to go in and get a clear cutting permit to fix it? I'm kind of confused about that.
So the section is what's prohibited, and clear cutting as part of commercial logging operation. You can see we added after that all non-essential tree removal or topping and limbing of trees in a parcel located within the scenic overlay district. Now, that is to refer back to the definition we gave earlier, which would say having that non-essential is understood to have no fundamental impact on the ability of life and the personal safety of owners or visitors to the property. So if you have to cut that, if you have to cut something because it got, badly damaged, and it's going to be a danger to people walking around, I think we've given some room for that. But when we come in and see, 5 trees topped all in a neat line next to somebody's window, that you're going to have a harder time, making the case for.
Yeah. So okay. So I am watching my clock a little bit.
All right.
So I think, we're still incubating this. And the next time we're going to talk about it will be 4 weeks from now, because I think we're going to be full up in 2 weeks talking about the telecommunications. But anything else, and I'm going to send this out to everybody again, just to have highlighted what we're.
Well, the last thing at the bottom is the mission of the tree committee, which we are essentially just trying to expand to include the ability to act as essentially pro bono advisors at the planning and remediation stage. We do have the purview to, we want to give either them or the planning board the ability to solicit professional services for when that is called for. But rather than go through that, I suppose we'll just take it from there. If you guys have any questions.
Yeah, I don't know that we can mandate a budget line in this code. I don't think we can do that.
That's a good.
I really don't think we can do that.
A good point. So.
Well, I guess this will just be on the town then to take as a supplementary suggestion.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I'll just add a little note here. I just add that in. Okay. All right. So we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything? So I'll be forwarding this to everybody. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Is there anything else? And we lost some people. Hey, it's just us. Cool. So anyway, is there and the other things that I had said, the other things that I had on the agenda, we can do those things another time. So because we're at the 1.5-hour mark. Anything else before we close?
Yeah, I just want to just acknowledge that I get really picky with code. And so it's not intentional. I'm not intending to be annoying. I'm just intending to make it really clear.
I
apologize if it's annoying.
I didn't take it as such, so don't worry about that.
I mean, our intention is identical, Connor. I just want to make sure that our intention is what actually shows up in the words. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Well, the reason why we have a group is because everybody brings good ideas in, and by the time we're done, we have a really good answer. So I appreciate everybody's input. Anything else before we break? Any motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Hey,
I think Jude had her hand up first. So, all righty. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk in 2 weeks. And we have lots of reading to do between now and then for telecommunications law.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.